You know, I remember playing Xenoblade X before Xenoblade 2 even came out. So at this point, I'm gonna become the living embodiment of that one Simpsons meme of the old guy yells at clouds while shaking his fist. And I'm gonna take this moment to talk about Xenoblade Chronicles X's canonicity with Xenoblade Chronicles as a whole. And if your retort to that is that you remember a time when Xenosaga existed, or God forbid Xenogears existed before the other games came out, well at this point just go casket shopping. Now a few days ago I made a video about Xenogears and the remake potential for that game. It was the foundation upon which the Xeno series coming afterwards would be built upon. And I'd argue Xenoblade X is probably the most weird entry in the entire Xeno series. It's just this weird spin-off that exists in almost a limbo state, where it ended off with a massive cliffhanger that is extremely uncommon for Monolith. Like, sure, you can argue Xenoblade 3 had a cliffhanger ending, but even then, Future Redeemed kinda picked up on it a little bit. Xenoblade X has this massive reveal in the post-credits scene and just never talks about it again, outside of the few Elma scenes you get as optional DLC in Xenoblade 2. That's not even canonical. But why do I say that Xenoblade X is canon? Well, it's not just for a good clickbait headline or title. It's because Xenoblade 2 kind of confirms it. Yeah, I know how I just said that the X DLC or Elma in 2 is non-canonical, at least that's how I always interpreted it. But people forget about the ending scene of Xenoblade 2 with Klaus's description of the events that led up to him creating the new world, and how he talks about there being many worlds and portals to many worlds opening up. Like, yeah, if you look at the specific events that transpired on Xenoblade X's version of Earth and Xenosaga's version of Earth, they don't line up, but I feel like we come upon one critical crossroads a lot of people struggle with when it comes to storytelling, especially when it comes to long-form storytelling. If the writers want it to happen, it can happen. And the way the story is written, it's written in such a way, right? Where if they wanted to bring X into the canon, they have multiple ways of doing so. They can write it off and say that Xenoblade X exists in one of those worlds that Klaus was referring to. And then job done. All the canon discrepancies go out the window because you can just write it off as a unique property of that parallel world. But you can even go a step further from that and say, hey, so all those events that are contradictory to the Xenoblade story and the Xenosaga story in X's introduction, yeah, those are all a misinterpretation. Yeah, those are all just like implanted memories because of the events of Mira, because something is special about Mira. Mira's just built different. Because when you look at them side to side, there's quite a few similarities between Mira and Ionios. And that's not a new principle, I'm not the one that came up with it, but when you look closely at it, if they wanted to tie these two places together, there's ways they can go about doing that. Both worlds are seemingly marked by a us versus them war. Ionios with Kevis versus Agnes, or the Liberators versus Alpha, or the Liberators versus Mobius. Whereas in X, you have humanity versus the Ganglion. I feel like at the time they made Xenoblade X, they fully wanted to follow up that story in some capacity. Because if you didn't, you just wouldn't make that post-credit scene. Because I thought X had a fine enough of an ending that could have been decently fulfilling if they just didn't have the post-credit scene where they alluded to, yeah, by the way, this is gonna have spoilers, where they alluded to Mira itself having some kind of special characteristic to it. Maybe they wanted to make an X2 at some point, but X just didn't sell well enough because, you know, it was on the Wii freaking U. And then 2 and 3 did very well, so they're just like, do we really want to go back and focus on X? It's already been years at this point, we've had multiple successful entries. Do we want to revisit these older pastures? Maybe they had a plan for it at one point, or maybe they're just trying to play a very long con. Or maybe they did move on from X, but due to whatever circumstances, they feel compelled to return to Mira. They have any number of possibilities here. But I don't think them worrying about how we're going to make Mira and Xenoblade X canon to Blade or the numbered games is a high concern for them. If they want to, they can make it canon relatively easily with little to no retcons required. X was already a story about taking these pre-described notions that you think you know, but you don't actually know, and turning them on their heads. Like, the biggest reveal of the game and the one everybody talks about when they say Xenoblade X has a cliffhanger ending. The entire point of us finding the Lifehold in Xenoblade X, which was the entire guiding Polaris star in the distance, that was our overall objective in X. Find the Lifehold. because we aren't actually humans in that game, we are robotic mimiosomes, or MIMS, operating essentially on battery power right now, and we need to find the life hold so we can get our bodies back. And then at the end of the game, after we operate under that one principle for the entirety of the game, we find out everything we know is wrong because the life hold, or at least that part of the life hold, was already destroyed from the beginning of the game. We should not be alive. We should not be existing. Xenoblade X, by that logic, should not have happened. But it did. There's something different. There's something special about Mira. So I think if we're trying to but claim that X is contradictory to the lore of Blade and Saga, so it can't be canonical, I feel like we're missing the forest from the trees here, because X's story was all about undermining those preconceived lore notions, and that there's something different, there's something special about Mira. And maybe it could be that when the white whale was leaving X's version of Earth, it happened to go through a portal undetected by anyone on board. Same thing with a gangling ship or something. And maybe they wound up in Klaus's world, and due to whatever energies were going on there, a Mira Ionios-esque world was formed, called Mira, and then the events of X take place over some time. There's many ways they can go about this. You have the easiest one, which is just say X is a parallel world, and if you want to bring X's world and characters into the story of the numbered games, all you do is open a portal, have some of them come through, boom, job done. And I've talked about this before. If they want to bring X into the canon, it's not a matter of if they can, it's a matter of do they want to. That's the only thing in my opinion. Do they want to bring X into the canon? Because X did not sell all that well because, again, Wii U. X also wasn't that focused on its overall narrative. It had a good narrative, but it didn't focus on it as much as 1, 2, and 3 did. It focused way more on its world and gameplay. And we're seeing inspiration from X be brought back into the mainline games with 3, and a lot of the design principles that went into 3's gameplay and world design, especially with Future Redeemed. And that may be all they really want to do with X. Going into the future, just, we're gonna have the future gameplay systems be inspired by X's formula, but we're not going to touch Mira again. They could go about that. They've done it up to this point. They could also say, hey, Nintendo's going to have some new hardware coming out in the next couple of years. Don't quote me on this next bit, but from what I've heard from other X fans in the past, Xenoblade X is a game that can scale very well with just throwing more power behind it. What if we brought X, change the UI up a bit, which solves like 90% of that game's issues, change the camera, add a freaking audio slider for the music, we launch that on the next Switch console, the next Nintendo console, and we see how that does. And if it does well, and if there's enough of an interest, then maybe we can revisit that world and that story and those characters. Because it's one that is ripe for innovation, ripe for iteration and expansion. It is a brilliant setting, it's a brilliant world with some really cool characters that, if they're given the storytelling love and care that modern Xenoblade, or just Xenoblade overall, the numbered games, gain and acquire, on top of its gameplay ideas that are unique to X, I fully believe that could do very well as an X2, but you have to get people interested in X to begin with. So for me, it's not a matter of if Xenoblade X is canon. Xenoblade 2 essentially, and Future Redeemed, mainly 2 though, with that many worlds that they brought into the equation, they can make whatever canon that they want. That's just a thing they can do. Whenever, wherever. They always have that ace up their sleeve. They can always bring that to the table. And they can always do another radio scene like they did in Future Redeemed, which brought Saga basically into the lore with one cutscene. And they're the writers. If they want to go the route of retconning certain things, they can do that. It's not like Xenoblade hasn't retconned stuff to begin with. Xenoblade 1 on the Wii didn't have Alvis. Well, he had Alvis, but he didn't have the Aegis Core Crystal. He didn't have that Ontos Core Crystal, he had a key. But in Definitive Edition, after the reveals we had with 2, they changed that key to the Ontos Core Crystal. So it's way more obvious who Alvis is if you play 2. And sure, you can argue that's a very, very, very light spoiler. Not spoiler, but retcon. But they can do stuff like that. They can just throw things like, hey, because of the nature of Mira, our cognition or our memories of what happened leading up to Project Exodus were distorted or untrustworthy. They have so many ways they can go about bringing X into the canon. It's not a matter of bringing X into the canon. It's a matter of if they want to. I would love to see that. I would love to see X get some love as maybe like a side series, right? Because my personal thoughts on the matter is I love X's gameplay loop and I want to see it iterated on and I want to see it continue. Whether that means X existing as a spin-off series, I'm fine with that. Or as a matter of making the mainline numbered games more like X in terms of its gameplay loop and open world design and scale, I'm also in favor of that. I love X's gameplay. And X has always just been this perpetual, unfinished story where it was clear. It's clear. If you played Xenoblade X from start to finish and you walk away from that game, you know they had plans for this story. And they had plans for where they wanted this story and narrative and these characters and this world to go. They wanted to flesh this out. They wanted to iterate. They wanted to build on it. Plans change. Years change as well. Like, years go by. Plans change. People change. Markets change. It could have just been a business decision that X just wasn't profitable enough. Could have been that maybe 2 was way more popular than they thought it would be. Same with 3. Or maybe this was the plan all along. It's hard to say. It's hard to tell. It's impossible to, until we find out one way or another from them. And maybe X's fate is obscurity. To continue drifting into the past, stuck on a dead console at this point. Never to be revisited, never to be iterated on again. I think that'd be pretty sad because I love the game. And I love Xenoblade X. Maybe they have plans for it. We can't tell. But I don't think the debate should be, how do they make this canon? Because they can make it. Or, they can't make this canon. It's not canon because of these lore reasons. They have plenty of workarounds for that. Plenty. Multiple. That's not the issue. The issue for me, or the issue for them, I imagine, is if they want to. And that's the only one that matters. So I'm going to call the video there for today. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games if you can. Hit that bell icon to be notified for when I upload and stream in the future. And leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And comment down below with your favorite memory from X, or if you haven't played X, if it received a port for either the Switch or the next console, would you be interested in playing it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games if you can, and as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody, until we meet again.